She was 29 years old, and she had never met her father. His name was Calvin Price, and he had left when she was 4 months old, and he had not left a forwarding address, a phone number, or a reason. What Simone Price had left of him was a single photograph, Calvin at 19, standing outside a diner in Memphis, squinting against the sun, and a middle name she had been given before he was gone, which was the name he had chosen. She had carried both of those things for 29 years without being sure why. She had not come to the Family Feud stage looking for him. She had come to win money for her mother's mortgage and to spend a day with her aunts doing something that wasn't hard. On the afternoon of July 11th, 2022, in the third round of a game that had been running perfectly normally, Steve Harvey asked the families to introduce themselves by sharing one thing the world didn't know about them. Simone stood at the podium and said, "The world doesn't know that I've been practicing what I'd say to my father since I was 12 years old. In case I ever found him." She said it plainly. The way you say something you've said privately so many times, it no longer feels dangerous. The room went silent. Steve Harvey looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to the side of the stage. Because Calvin Price was standing there. He had been standing there for 45 minutes. And nobody had told Simone. It was a July afternoon in Atlanta, and the studio was warm, and the lights were the way they always were. The Price family had come from Nashville. Simone, her mother Beverly, her aunts Diane and Carol, and her cousin Jerome. They were close, this family. The kind of close that happens when a circle has held itself together for a long time, without the one person who was supposed to be in it. Beverly Price was 53. She wore gold earrings she had owned since 1991, and she touched them, once when the families were introduced, in the way a person touches something they rely on. Simone stood at the podium with the ease of someone who has learned to be comfortable in her own skin through a long and deliberate process. She had a way of smiling that was complete. It reached everywhere. Steve Harvey noticed it immediately. He said, "You have got one of those smiles that makes everybody in the room feel like they just got included in something." Simone said, "My mother says the same thing. She says I got it from her." Beverly, from the contestant row, said, "She did." The other family, the Carters from Augusta, Georgia, 3 adult brothers and their 2 daughters, played enthusiastically and cleanly. The game moved well. Steve Harvey was in the rhythm he gets into when both families are good and the energy is right. It was, by every measure, a normal taping on a normal afternoon. Nobody in that studio knew that the production team had been working on what was about to happen for 4 months. Calvin Price had been found through a combination of what the Family Feud production team called a background enrichment process, a voluntary program offered to families after casting confirmation, and the detective work of a woman named Brianna on the outreach team who had been doing this specific kind of work for 6 years. Brianna had found Calvin Price in Memphis. He was 51 years old. He was working as a logistics coordinator for a regional freight company. He had a second family, a wife named Donna, a son named Marcus, who was 14, and he had not told Donna about Simone until Brianna called. The conversation between Calvin and Donna lasted 2 hours. Calvin had called Brianna back the next morning and said he wanted to come. He had driven from Memphis to Atlanta. He had arrived at the studio 3 hours early. A production handler had kept him in a green room with coffee and a television showing the live feed from the studio floor. Calvin Price had watched his daughter play Family Feud for 45 minutes before Simone said what she said into the live microphone. What Brianna had not told Calvin, what she had not told anyone outside the production corps, was what Simone had said in her intake interview when asked if there was anything she wanted people to know about her family. Simone had said, "My father left when I was 4 months old. I don't know where he is. I've never been angry at him. Not really. Not in the way people expect. What I am is curious. And I've been practicing what I would say if I met him. I've been practicing since I was 12. The intake interviewer had flagged the response. Brianna had read it the next morning. And that wasn't even the part that broke Steve Harvey. The third round continued. Steve moved through the remaining questions, and when the natural introduction break came, the moment he always creates between rounds to let the families breathe, he turned to the podium and asked his question. He said it to both families, casually, the way he always does. Tell me something the world doesn't know about you. Something real. 2 or 3 people answered on the Carter side. A brother who had been afraid of birds since childhood. A daughter who had competed in fencing for 8 years. Then the microphone passed to Simone. And she said what she said. The room held its breath. Steve Harvey did not respond immediately. He looked at Simone for a long moment. Then he turned, slowly, toward the side of the stage. He caught the eye of the stage manager. The stage manager gave one small nod. Steve turned back to Simone. He said, very quietly, "Can I ask you something? The thing you've been practicing, to your father, what does it start with?" Simone looked at him. She said, "It starts with I forgive you. Because I decided a long time ago that the first thing I said was not going to be a question. I didn't want him to feel like he had to defend himself before I said the important thing." The studio fell completely silent. Steve Harvey stepped back from the podium. He pressed his handkerchief to his face. His shoulders moved. He took off his glasses. He set them on the podium. He did not pick them up for a very long time. Then, he said, "Simone, I need you to look toward the side of the stage." Simone turned. Calvin Price was walking out from the side door. He was wearing a dark blue shirt, and he was walking the way a person walks when they are not sure their legs will continue to work. He got to the center of the stage, and he stopped. He looked at his daughter. He looked at her the way a person looks at something they have been imagining for so long that the real version is almost too specific to process. Simone looked at him. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "I forgive you." She said it first, exactly the way she had practiced. Calvin Price sat down on the floor of the Family Feud stage. Not because his legs gave out, though they may have, but because it was the only response his body could make to what had just happened. He sat down and he put his face in his hands, and his shoulders moved, and the sounds he made were not words. Simone walked to him. She kneeled down. She put her hand on his shoulder. She said it again, quietly, close to him, for him specifically, "I forgive you. I need you to hear that first." Steve Harvey walked behind the podium. He stood with his back to the cameras for a full 30 seconds. The crew was crying. The audience, 207 people, was completely silent except for the sounds of people trying not to make sounds. The Carter family across the stage was holding each other. Beverly Price, at the end of the contestant row, had her hands pressed to her mouth. Aunt Diane had her arm around her. Aunt Carol was looking at the ceiling. Steve turned back. His face showed everything. He did not try to arrange it. He walked to the edge of the stage, looked at Simone and Calvin on the floor and said, "I am not going to rush this. Take all the time you need. We have nowhere to be." He was not done. He pulled out his phone on the live stage, something hosts never do during tapings. He turned to the audience. He said, "I want to say something while they have a moment." He addressed the cameras, the one that goes everywhere. He said, "I grew up in Cleveland, and I know what it is to want something from a parent and not have it. To build a story in your head about what you would say if you ever had the chance. To practice it. To carry it with you. He paused. What this young woman did, the thing she practiced first, was not the question and not the accusation. It was the release. She practiced leading with forgiveness. Before anything else. He stopped. He pressed his handkerchief to his face. "I need a minute." He took it. Then he said, "I have been hosting television for 30 years. I have never seen anything like that. Not once." He made his call. He called a man named Dr. James Whitfield, a family reunification counselor based in Atlanta who had worked with the show before, who understood the specific architecture of this kind of meeting, the way it needs to be supported beyond the moment. He put the call on speaker and he said, "James, I need you today. I have a father and a daughter on my stage who are meeting for the first time. They need someone who knows how to help them figure out what comes next." He looked at Calvin, still on the floor, now sitting upright with Simone beside him. He said, "Whatever comes next, that part belongs to them. But they shouldn't have to figure it out without support." He wasn't finished. He stood in front of both families. He said, "The $20,000 prize, both families." Today, he looked at the Carter family, who were already nodding before he finished. Marcus Carter, the eldest brother, said, "She should have all of it." Steve said, "She's getting it. You're getting it too. Because you showed up today, and you played, and you were decent human beings, and that is worth something." The audience rose to its feet. When the episode aired 9 weeks later, the 47-second clip, Simone saying what she had practiced, Steve turning toward the side of the stage, Calvin walking out, Simone kneeling, had already been viewed 160 million times. It had leaked from a production assistant's private message to a friend who had posted it publicly. And it had spread with the speed that only a certain category of human moment travels. By the time the full episode broadcast, total views across all platforms had passed 290 million. The hashtag #SheLeadWithForgiveness trended in 52 countries. A psychologist appeared on 3 separate network morning programs to explain why the clip was so affecting. She said, "The young woman chose to lead with the gift, not the grievance. Most of us never manage that." 3 months after the taping, Simone and Calvin had spoken on the phone 4 times. The conversations were not easy, and they were not performed. They were the kind of conversations that belong to people who are building something from the foundation rather than inheriting a structure that already exists. Calvin had told Donna everything. Donna had met Simone on a video call that lasted 2 hours. Marcus, Calvin's 14-year-old son, had sent Simone a text message that said, "My dad talks about you now. He says, you're brave." Simone had read it 7 times. A year after the taping, Simone and Calvin had seen each other in person 3 times. They had eaten a meal together twice. Once at a restaurant in Nashville, once at Calvin's house in Memphis. At the Memphis dinner, Donna had cooked. Simone had brought Beverly. Beverly and Donna had sat next to each other at the table and talked for 2 hours about things that had nothing to do with Calvin. Beverly told a story about Simone at age 4 that made Donna laugh so hard she had to put her fork down. Calvin sat at the end of the table and watched his 2 families share a meal, and he did not say very much. He was learning that some things do not require commentary. Some things just need to be sat with, quietly, for as long as they take. Today, Simone Price has a second photograph of her father. She took it herself, at the Memphis dinner, on her phone. Calvin is at the head of the table, and he is laughing at something Beverly said. His face is open. His eyes are creased. He looks nothing like the 19-year-old squinting outside the Memphis diner. He looks like someone who found something he had lost, at the exact moment he had stopped believing he deserved to find it. Simone has both photographs now, the one she was given and the one she took. She keeps them in the same place. Marcus, Calvin's 14-year-old son who sent Simone that text message. "My dad talks about you now. He says you're brave." Met Simone in person for the first time at the Memphis dinner. He was quiet at first. He moved through the room carefully, watching. He watched his father and Simone talk. He watched his mother Donna and Beverly find their conversational rhythm. Then, at some point in the evening, he sat down next to Simone and asked her something. She told the story of what he asked later, in an interview, and said she had to take a breath before she could answer. He had asked, "Do you feel like you missed something, not having him?" Simone had looked at this 14-year-old who had grown up with the fathers she had not. She said, "Yes and no. I built everything I have from who I became without him. I wouldn't trade that. But yes, I missed something. I'm glad I'm not missing it anymore." Marcus had nodded the way 14-year-olds nod when they understand something more than they're ready to say. He had gone back to his food. Later, when it was time to leave, he had given Simone a handshake that became a hug halfway through. She let it be a hug. Dr. James Whitfield, who supported the reunification process, said in a later interview that what made Simone and Calvin's reunion unusual was the thing Simone had started it with. He said, "In my 22 years of doing this work, I have never had a case where the child led with forgiveness before the parent had said a word. Normally, forgiveness comes at the end, if it comes at all. Simone had decided as a 12-year-old that the first sentence was going to be the most generous one. That changes everything. It changes what the parent has to carry. It changes what the relationship has to overcome. She gave her father a foundation before he had said a single word, and everything they have built since then is built on that. Some people practice their pain for 29 years and lead with it when the moment comes. Simone Price practiced for 29 years and led with something else. She led with what she had decided mattered most, and in doing so, she did not just open a door for her father. She opened one for herself, one she had been standing in front of for a very long time, holding a key she had made herself, waiting for the right moment to turn it. The moment was a July afternoon on a television stage in Atlanta. The key had been made when she was 12 years old. In the quiet of whatever room 12-year-olds go to when they are deciding who they are going to be. She had been deciding for 17 years. And when the door finally opened, she did not hesitate. She had been ready for a very long time. If this incredible story of a daughter who led with forgiveness and the father who finally showed up touched your heart, subscribe and share this with someone who believes it is never too late to find your way back to someone. Have you ever rehearsed something for years and finally said it out loud? Share your story in the comments. Because as Simone proved, the most powerful thing you can practice is not the question. It's the release. Ring that notification bell for more moments that remind us what it looks like when love decides to go first.